Hey, it's Vicky, and today I'm here to talk about the books I read in July. July was a really interesting month. I feel like it was very busy, but it also felt like it dragged on and on. So I don't know. As far as my reading goes, it was an interesting month as well. I went outside of my comfort zone a little bit, which I'll talk about. And I think it was overall a good month. I did have a 5-star read, but I also had a 2.5-star read. So yeah, I read 8 things, 4 print books, 1 ebook, and 3 books on audio. So yeah, let's dive in. So I started off the month by going outside of my comfort zone, way outside of my comfort zone. And I think it was because lately I just felt like I had been reading a lot of horror and like dark things. Even some of the I feel like contemporary stuff I was reading it just felt dark, and I wanted to just read something completely different from what I normally would read. And especially because I did take part in Summerween, which was in the beginning of the month. It started on, was it the 7th or the 9th? I think it was the 7th of the month. I had some time before that readathon started, and that readathon was all about reading like thrillers and horror. And so I wanted something that was not a thriller or horror, just kind of cleanse my palate. And so I went to the library, I was just sort of browsing, and I came across a romance book. Yes, you heard me properly, romance book. And I read it, and I liked it. I read The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. And the reason I picked this one up, the cover sort of drew me in, first of all. It was in the little, my library has a little section of books that are recommended by the staff, and that was one of them. And so I picked it up, and it basically was about a young woman, Florence, if that was her name. I can't remember exactly. She works in the publishing industry as a ghostwriter, and she ghostwrites for this very famous romance novelist. And nobody knows that she does this. It's kind of a secret, whatever. And she gets a new editor, meets him. They have sort of an awkward introduction. Things don't go quite like how she planned. And then I think it's like the next day she gets the terrible news that her father has passed away, and she has to go back home for his funeral and all of those, all of the things attached to that loss. And so she goes back to her hometown. I cannot remember now if it was North Carolina or South Carolina. It was one of the Carolinas. She goes back home. And another kind of thing that that you find out about her early on is that she does have this ability to talk to ghosts. Ghosts will talk to her. And I think that was kind of part of the reason that I was like, okay, this is a romance book, but it has like a supernatural ghosty element, which is something I normally really like. Okay, let's try it. And so anyway, she goes back to her hometown, and who shows up at her door as a ghost but her new editor? Apparently, he has just died, and he needs her help. Because generally when the ghosts contact her, it's because they need help with some sort of unfinished business, or they need help moving on, and she kind of helps them. And there goes the story from there. So what I liked about this was, like I said, it is a romance book, but it doesn't just completely focus on the romance element. It deals a lot with grief and the loss of a parent, and then it also kind of had that supernatural sort of slant to it that I don't think is very typical of a romance book. And so overall, I thought it was really good. There were definitely parts, especially towards the end, that were, predictable, where you sort of guess what's gonna happen and all that. Other than that though, it was an enjoyable read. I actually really liked it. I actually kind of want to read, Ashley Poston I think has, I don't know if it's a new book, if it just came out, but it's another one I've seen around. I can't remember what it's called, but I'll post it here if I remember and find the cover. I'll post it here, that I kind of want to read now. So I don't know. I read a romance book and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I think it was just what I needed. I needed something different. I wanted something that, I wouldn't call this book lighthearted, but it sort of was. I don't know. It was different from the things I had been reading. And it totally just fit the bill for what I was looking for, and I highly enjoyed it. And yeah, I gave it 4 stars. Who knew? Then I listened to a book on audio. I listened to The Soul of an Octopus by Cy Montgomery. This is a nonfiction book about octopuses. And this was a really fascinating book. Cy Montgomery, you can tell in her writing, this is my first time reading Cy Montgomery, and you can really tell that she loves animals, is very passionate about animals. You just felt that. Because she also narrated the audiobook, and you just really felt that as you were listening to this book. She does tend to go on a little bit about like her gushy loviness for them, but I also sort of liked that about it. It felt more emotional, if that makes any sense. A lot of times if you're reading nonfiction, you know, it's all about the facts, and I've never read a book like this, a nonfiction book that's centered around an animal or biology or anything like that. And so I feel like it could be really easy for a book like this to get very dry and boring, and I did not feel that with this book. And I think it was because she had so much, you could just feel her passion jump off the page or whatever. I learned a lot about octopuses, as you would guess, and it made me kind of want a pet one, which is basically impossible, because they have a very particular way that they need to live. But just so many things about them, how just how they have sort of like have personalities and how smart they are, and just all of that. They're very fascinating animals. So I enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars. Highly recommend. Even if you're not the type to read nonfiction books like this, I would recommend this one. It was really good. Then I took part in Summerween, hence I'm wearing my shirt today, and I read 3 books during that readathon. So I'm not going to talk about them here. I did do a vlog for the readathon that you can go check out to get my deep thoughts, but I read You've Lost a Lot of Blood by Eric LaRocca. I gave this 3 stars. And then I read Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesar, and I believe I gave this one 3 stars as well. 3.5. I gave it 3.5 stars. And then I had my 5-star read for the month, which was The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. I read this one on my Kindle. Fantastic thriller. I had a great time reading this book. It was 5 stars. I loved it. I'm not sure if I want to read the sequel that recently came out. It's called The Kind Worth Saving. Let me know if any of you guys have read that. If I should read it or if I should just let it alone. Because to me, it's like that book was just so good that I don't know how the sequel could possibly live up to it. But yeah, those were the 3 books I completed during the readathon. So if you want my deep thoughts, go check out my vlog. Then after the readathon, I wanted to completely switch gears again and read something that wasn't horror, wasn't a thriller, wasn't dark. So I picked up Sunny by Jason Reynolds. And this also fulfilled the buzzword reading challenge for me for this month, which was to read a book with weather words in the title. So Sunny was perfect. And this is the 3rd book in the track series that centers around a group of kids that are on a track team together, and each book focuses on a different member of that team. In this one, it was Sunny, who is a young boy who is really good at running. He is used to winning first place ribbons all the time. He doesn't really have to try very hard. But the thing about him is he's not super passionate about running. He runs because his dad wants him to, and so his dad has been basically forcing him to do this since he could walk pretty much. So the book was interesting because it was told through diary entries that Sunny was writing, so you really got a sense of his voice and his personality, and he was a very funny character. His voice was kind of quirky and he was kind of silly, but I really enjoyed him. The only thing about this, of the 3 books, this is my 3rd favorite. They kind of have gone down a little bit with each book. My favorite one is still Ghost, which was the 1st book. And then this one, I liked the sort of story arc that Sunny has in this. I just wished that, because at the beginning of the book, he tells you via his diary that he really wants to dance. Like, that's what he really likes to do, is dance. And I wish that the book would have focused more on him kind of going in that direction and exploring that avenue a little more. And instead, I don't want to say too much about what happens instead, because it would be kind of, I feel like it would be kind of spoilery. But I wish that it would have been more about him transitioning away from track and field into dance, which was something he was more passionate about. But I think as a topic, it's a really good topic because, you know, lots of kids, I feel like, do certain activities or sports because their parents want them to, when really their, you know, their passions may lie somewhere else. And I liked that this book is out there for kids that are like, hey, that was me. Like, I didn't want to play this sport. I wanted to do this instead, and I switched gears or whatever. Because I think that's something that a lot of kids deal with, especially today. So yeah, this was fun. It was cute. I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. So yeah, hopefully I will read the 4th book. Hopefully by the end of this year is my goal, to read the 4th book, which I believe is called Lou. Then I read an anticipated thriller. I was ready to get back on the thriller train, and I read Riley Sager's new book, The Only One Left. I actually tabbed this, which I'm not much of a tabber, but I wanted to kind of keep track of my theories and my thoughts as I read this book, because Riley Sager's books tend to have 89 twists in them, and this one was no different. There were quite a few twists in this book, and I wanted to kind of see how many I could guess. And I would say it's fair to say that, like, I don't think anybody could possibly guess every single twist, but I will proudly say that the big twist, the main twist, I guessed pretty early on in the book. But anyway, I didn't tell you what this is about. This is about a woman named Kit, and the book takes place in the 1980s, which I did not realize until I started reading it. So it takes place in 1983, which I thought was pretty cool. And Kit is a caregiver as her profession, and she gets a job to care for this woman named Lenora Hope, who lives on this big giant mansion, kind of like the cover suggests, on the edge of a cliff, pretty much. And the thing about Lenora is, way back, like 50 years ago, her family was murdered, her parents and her sister, and everybody thought that it was Lenora who did it. But she, you know, was never arrested or tried or anything like that because there was not enough evidence to prove that she did, but pretty much everybody in town was convinced that she killed her family. And so here's Kit having to care for this now very, you know, this woman in her like 70s who, due to strokes and other ailments, is paralyzed and cannot speak and is only able to actually use her left hand. And yeah, the story sort of goes from there. She starts to kind of learn about, because Lenora has a typewriter and is able to type to her, you know, what really happened, start telling her story about what really happened that night with her family and all of that. And I think this was a bit of a slow book. It did take me a little longer to read, but I have found that that is the case with every Riley Sager book I read. His books do tend to just naturally be a slow burn for me. So I wasn't surprised by that. I wasn't bothered by that because it's getting to be something I sort of expect. I think as a gothic story, this was great. I really loved the setting, this big house that's like falling apart, and it's on a cliff that is literally like falling apart, and the house is like probably gonna fall in the ocean any day. That whole thing was just great to me. I loved the setting. I liked that it took place in the 80s, though I think there could have been more things about the plot to show you that it took place in the 80s. I didn't really get that vibe as much as I wanted to. You didn't really get a sense of the time period, but I get why he put it in that time period, because then like you didn't have like modern technology, right? And much of Lenora's story, her past, of those events, her family being murdered, took place in 1929, which seems like such a long time ago, right? So those were things that I liked, though again, a little bit of critiquing there with the time period. And though I did guess the main twist, it was still a good twist. It was good, it was well plotted, I enjoyed it. There were a couple other things, reveals that happened towards the very end, that I didn't like so much. There was one in particular that if you've read the book, you might know what I'm saying. One in particular that to me just totally came out of left field. Like I was like, when that was revealed, I was like, how and why, and well, okay. So There were things I liked about some of the twists and turns, and then things I didn't like. But overall, I had fun with this. I thought it was a good time. I enjoyed it. I'm gonna give it 3.75 stars because I think it would have been a 4-star book if not for, like I said, my problem with some of the twists at the end were a little bit meh for me. So if I were to rank this with all the Riley Sager books, I would put this in 4th place, I would say, because my favorite is still Home Before Dark. That one has not been topped. Followed by Lock Every Door, followed by Final Girls. Though I'm starting to feel like I need to reevaluate Final Girls. Like, I feel like I gave Final Girls 4 stars, but now I'm wondering if it really deserved 4 stars, and if I were to reread it, if I would actually knock it down lower. But anyway, as of right now, Final Girls is 3rd, and then I would put this one. So it's in the middle, which is good. Overall, yeah, if you like gothic fiction, especially ones that take place in big old, kind of weird, creepy houses, you can't go wrong here. And then I finished out the month with my 2.5-star read that I didn't enjoy very much. I read Black House by Stephen King and Peter Straub, and I didn't really like it that much. This one is a sequel to The Talisman, which Peter Straub and Stephen King wrote together. It was published, I want to say, in '83 or so. This one came out in 2001, so there's quite a gap between the two books. In this one, the main character, Jack, was the young boy from the first book, and now he's an adult, he's grown up, he's a cop. And basically, this is kind of like it has kind of a detective murder mystery sort of vibe, because Jack, as an adult, is having to find out who is kidnapping a bunch of children, have been going missing, and he is trying to figure out who is doing it and why, and it ties into events that took place when he was a child, during the book The Talisman, that he has, as an adult, sort of repressed and forgotten, and he has to kind of remember to help him solve what's going on now. And that's like kind of all I'll say. My problem with this book was, first of all, it was so slow. It was the sloggiest slog that ever slogged. It took forever for the actual plot to take off. I think I noted you didn't meet or see or get introduced to Jack, who's supposed to be the main character, until like this around 70-page mark, which to me is far too long to go. I don't care if the book's 600 pages. I want to meet my main character right away. We didn't see him for 70 pages. I did not like the writing. The writing choices in this book, I don't know why they wrote it the way they wrote it. They kind of went with this, which this style of writing I think works when you're talking about like a screenplay or something that's going to be later used as a movie or TV. It was sort of that bird's eye view sort of approach, where they kind of tell you like, oh, we're floating across the sky, and then we're gonna zoom down into this house, into this window, and meet this character, and then we're gonna fly back out the window and fly over here and go over to this store over here. And to me, I did not like that. I didn't like it at all. And then there was this ridiculous phrase that was used so many times in this book. I wish I had written down how many times that I came across this phrase, because it was a lot and it was too much, overdone. And the phrase was, I'm gonna read it to you because the phrase was, they would be like talking about something like, let's just say like a kid he's in a room and he's like, oh, I gotta get out of here. You know, I wanna leave, it's time to go. And then they would say, this is what they would say: case closed, game over, zip up your fly. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Case closed, game over, zip up your fly. Why? What? And then, like I said, it was used probably like 97 times. I mean, just completely overdone, and it's a stupid phrase anyway. The only redeeming thing about this book was the Dark Tower connections, because there are quite a few Dark Tower connections to this book and to The Talisman, and I did enjoy those parts, but you didn't get to those parts until way further into the book, towards the end really, where it really started to like show up. And though I really liked that aspect, it could not redeem this book for me. It just could not. I got to the point where I think I was listening to this on audio and I still had probably 2 or 3 hours left, and I was already just like, I don't even care anymore. I'm just over this book. And honestly, like, if I wasn't a Stephen King completionist and feeling like I have to read every single Stephen King book, I would have DNF'd this. Like, I would have DNF'd it 50 pages in. But I was like, no, I gotta push through. I gotta read every Stephen King book. And so I cannot recommend this, sadly. I would say read The Talisman, because I did like The Talisman. Though even that, I wouldn't put it in like my top 10 Stephen Kings, even then. I think I gave The Talisman like 3 stars. I did enjoy it though. It was good. But I would say you don't need to bother with this. Like, and I don't know, maybe I'm the minority here. I don't know how the general consensus is with this book in terms of like Stephen King fandom, but for me, this was just not a win. This was just not it. 2.5 stars. I'm glad it's over. I will never pick this up again. All right, so there we go. That's how my July went. It was kind of a mixed bag in terms of genres, in terms of ratings. Yeah, overall, an okay month. Let me know down below how July went for you. What was your favorite book of the month? I would love to know. Did you do anything fun and summery in July? I would love to know that. And I think that's it. So yeah, I hope that you guys had a good month. I hope that August treats you well, and I will talk with you soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.